also, if at any time you have difficulty hearing or understanding what I'm saying, please just let me know in the chat box. If the name Michelle is actually me, Ashley, it's just a funny glitch that way. Can you please make it louder? Amanda, I can, how is that if I hold the microphone closer? Great. Well, just so that I'm not a voice floating around, there's a picture of me, Ashley. I'm a project coordinator at Mobility International USA, also known as MIUSA. We're a nonprofit organization that promotes the rights of people with disabilities around the world. And one of the main projects that MIUSA runs is the National Clearinghouse on Disability and Exchange. The goal of this project is to get more people with disabilities to have international exchange experiences in other countries. So we provide free information, such as tips on how people with disabilities can be included in international exchange. A lot of people with many different types of disabilities contact us, and sometimes international exchange organizations contact us as well, usually when they're working with a participant who has a disability, or if they want to know how to make their exchange programs more accessible. On the right here, there's this little symbol that says sponsored by the U.S. Department of State, Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs. This is actually the same organization that sponsors many international exchange programs that we're going to be talking about in this webinar, such as Fulbright and others. One question that a lot of people with disabilities ask us is, where are some places that people with disabilities can travel to? And you know what? Actually, people with disabilities have traveled and lived in pretty much every corner of the world that you can think of. Where they travel to really depends on what the individual person is comfortable with, and also how much of a challenge that they're willing to take on. My question for the people with disabilities in this webinar right now is, have you ever traveled outside of the United States before? If so, can you type your answers in the chat box? And it looks like we have another person who joined us, Shakia. Nice to see you, Shakia. Thanks for joining us. So while you're typing some of the places that you've traveled to in other countries, I'll read a couple of examples that I have here on the screen. Oops. Let me fix those captions. How's that? Great. Someone has been to Latin America. The people in the photos, on the slide photos, include people who have traveled to Jordan for a disability leadership exchange program, a professional who's been to China, a student who traveled to Tibet, plus many other countries on her program, and also a student who traveled to Costa Rica, also on a disability exchange program. Let's see, I'm going to move the slides around a little bit. I'm going to have to make the slides smaller so I can make the caption pod a little larger. Hopefully that'll work. Oh, cool. I'm reading some of the comments that you're leaving me. Some of you have been to not only Latin America, but Spain, Philippines, Hong Kong, Germany, Austria, Spain, France, Australia, Thailand, and Kazakhstan. That's really exciting. And it'll crop out the... Yeah, let's see. And I think, let's see, maybe if I move this pod, I'm going to do some rearranging here on the screen so that hopefully that works. All right. Better? Okay, so earlier I mentioned that we want people with disabilities to consider traveling abroad, not just for leisure and vacation, but for international exchange. And one common type of international exchange is study abroad. But you probably are aware that there are a lot of other types of opportunities to go abroad, including volunteering, internships, teaching English, even playing sports or music. Um, as the person in the right hand top photos demonstrating, professionals can go abroad too. It's not just for students. People who can share their professional experiences. So people with disabilities are really doing all kinds of things while at the same time sharing their cultures, learning new skills, and making new friends in other countries. And more people with disabilities are recognizing that having an international experience in another country can help them reach a lot of their goals back in the United States, such as finding a job or enhancing a career. Some of them who want to get into graduate school programs or people who have personal goals like wanting to be more independent or trying new things will sometimes find that traveling to another country for international exchange is a great way to start. And despite the many benefits of international exchange, the expenses related to it can be overwhelming sometimes. Um, Participants are expected to usually pay tuition and program fees, health insurance. There are fees for passports and visas. They'd have to think about housing, plane tickets, and sometimes immunizations. So these and all the other expenses that can go along with it can add up really quickly. Some people with disabilities require accommodations or services that have additional costs, such as wages for sign language interpreters or personal care assistants. So how can anyone afford to do these kinds of international exchange programs? How can we afford to do travel in other countries? Well, how much it actually will cost will really depend on factors like where you decide to go and for how long, whether you're receiving academic credit for your program. Also, there are usually cost differences depending on whether you're going through an exchange program or whether you're arranging your an independent type of travel. And also the exchange type, such as um, study abroad versus um, volunteering abroad versus teaching English or something like that. And most people use a combination of strategies to fund their international exchange. We're going to explain some funded exchange programs and scholarships that maybe you've never heard of before, but might be interested in. I should add that only a few of the funding ideas that I'm going to be talking about are exclusively to increase their awareness of all of these really great funding opportunities that exist. Because one of the number one questions that we get is what kinds of funding is out there for people with disabilities? And, you know, they're not necessarily aware that um, a lot of different kinds of scholarships and funded programs exist. So I'd like to go over some of them. I do also want to note that MIUSA does not provide funding. Oh, I hear somebody said the sound cut out. Is everyone able to hear me? Hello? Oh, okay, great. Somebody said it's back. Okay, good. So MIUSA does not provide funding, but we do share information on where you can find funding from other sources. There are several types of ways to find funding for an international exchange experience. So let's talk about some of them. The first is funded programs and fellowships. Um, and then I'll go into the next one, then I'll explain the difference. The next is scholarships and grants and loans. So what's the difference? When we say funded programs and fellowships, these are usually international exchange programs that um, arrange tend to arrange everything for you. So they decide, they help you decide which country you can go to, or maybe there's specific activities that you have to do for the program. Whereas with a scholarship, maybe you've already found say, for example, a study abroad program or a volunteer abroad program, and you already know that you want to apply, but you just need to find some funding to go towards it. In contrast, the funded programs kind of determines what the exchange program will be like. Um, but the great thing is that it already includes a lot of expense funding that covers some of your expenses. Usually, for example, housing or fees or airfare and things like that. The next one that a lot of people with disabilities may not necessarily realize is that some of the US government programs and services, for example, Social Security benefits and vocational rehabilitation income, or US veterans benefits, can sometimes be used outside of the country towards international exchange if all of the requirements are met. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about what those requirements are later on. One of the other funding strategies that people use is fundraising and cost saving. So these are ways that they can cut down on costs. And maybe people did receive scholarships from some places, or maybe they even received are going on a funded exchange program. But there are usually still some expenses, like you know, being able to fund your own personal travel, or um, maybe taking classes while you're in the other country on your own, or otherwise passports or visa kinds of things. And so usually people will have to do their own fundraising in order to meet all of their expenses. So let's start by looking at some examples of funded exchange programs for people at different, we're going to cover different age and education levels as well. So I'll start off by talking about a few high school student programs that you might not have heard of. Um, I think it's really incredible that there are so many high school students out there who are eager to travel and have an adventure on their own. A couple that I'd like to talk about are youth leadership programs. This is a U.S. Department of State sponsored program for high school students between 15 and 17. These are 3 to 4 week long programs in several different countries, including Sri Lanka, Nepal, and Indonesia, as well as some others. And in these programs, students really get a diversity of experiences in these 3 to 4 weeks, including doing volunteer projects. They meet other youth and do team building activities with them. They get to develop themselves as leaders. And in addition, they live with a local host family. There is no language requirement, so it's a great way for students to get a little bit of exposure to the international travel bug. And a great thing about this program is that educators can also apply for the program. Another similar example is the Kennedy Lugar Yes Abroad program. And this is for American high school students as well as recent graduates. And then this one differs in that it's up to 1 academic year of living in another country. And again, there are several countries to choose from, but one major component of this program is that students study in countries with significant Muslim populations. Can anyone give me an example of a country that might have a significant Muslim population? Jordan, yep, that's a great example. Some other countries that are eligible that Yes Students Abroad have gone to include India, Malaysia, Turkey, Morocco, Thailand, and even South Africa. So really, there are a bunch of places all over the world that YES students get to go on. And I've included links for people who are interested, but I'd also be happy to share more information about any of these programs after the webinar for anyone who's interested. One last high school student program that I'm going to be talking about is the National Security Language Initiative for Youth, which is abbreviated as NESLI. And this program is for students between 15 and 18, and length can be anywhere from a summer to a full academic year. The best part about this program is that it's a great way for high school students to develop their exposure to some less commonly taught languages. So not only do they get to live with the host family, but they get to participate in really intensive language study. Let me know, does anyone speak any of the following languages? Arabic, Mandarin, Korean, Russian, Persian. These are just some of the languages that high school students on the NESLI program get to study in countries where languages are spoken, such as China, India, Jordan again, Morocco, Russia, etc. And now I imagine we have a lot of undergraduate students in this webinar. Maybe anyone can make a smiley face if you're an undergraduate student right now. One really popular program that we really try and make sure that people with disabilities are aware of so that they can apply is called the Gilman International Scholarship Program. So this program is specifically for US undergraduate students, and they have to be receiving a federal Pell Grant in order to qualify. This usually has to do with income level. And what's particularly special about this scholarship program is that it seeks out people who are traditionally underrepresented in study abroad. So this means maybe ethnic minorities or people who are the first people in their families to go to college, people who come from families of low income, but also people with disabilities. And for that reason, we've known many people with disabilities who have traveled and studied abroad on this Gilman Scholarship Program. And it provides up to $5,000. So that's really a substantial amount for to cover some tuition fees and things like that. Students can go anywhere from 4 weeks to up to a year. And students get to choose which study abroad program they go on as well. I've included some photos and some brief descriptions of a couple of Gilman alumni who have disabilities, including Christina, who has traveled to Bangalore, India, and Zachary, who traveled to Cyprus for a semester. And they've been gracious enough to share their stories on our website, talking a little bit about what it was like to study in those countries and what it was like to apply for the Gilman. So if anyone is interested in the Gilman, I'd be happy to share more information. A couple of other undergraduate scholarship programs include the Critical Language Program, which is a fully funded summer language institute for US students. This is also sponsored by the US Department of State. And the reason why this program came about was so that more students could be exposed to what are so-called critical languages. In other words, kind of languages that are strategic to the US. And this is similar to that NESLI scholarship I mentioned earlier. So qualifying languages include things like Hindi or Turkish or Urdu, Arabic, Chinese, even Japanese. So in other words, languages that students might not necessarily study. They're not as popular as, say, French or Spanish, but they're very important to the US. And for this reason, the State Department is sponsoring undergraduate students to study them in everywhere from China to Russia and beyond. Finally, one that I'd like to mention is the Boren Award. And I'd like to also point out that the Boren Awards have deadlines that are coming up in January and February every year. The reason why there are two deadlines is because Boren Awards have a scholarship for undergraduate students and a fellowship for graduate students. So undergraduates or graduates can apply, and they can choose to go for a summer, a full semester, or a full academic year in another country. Um, Although a lot of students will choose to go to Western Europe or Australia or New Zealand or Canada, the Boren Awards really encourage people to travel to destinations that are not so common or not as common in study abroad. So they encourage you to go to places in Asia or the Middle East or Sub-Saharan Africa, Latin America. Um, so think of some of these so-called less common destinations and where you would want to travel to. There's also a component to the Boren Awards that includes an internship program, um, usually in an area of um, perhaps humanitarianism or health or political science. And one other thing is Boren Award recipients um, will work for the federal government for at least 1 year after graduation. So not only is the Boren Award an excellent opportunity to travel abroad, but it's also a great way to get a foot in the door in your career, especially if you're interested in a career with the government. And now on to postgraduate programs. Has anyone here heard of the Fulbright Program? It's a very prestigious award. Shakia has, excellent. But what not a lot of people realize is that Fulbright is actually um, offers many different types of awards and grants depending on your education level, your experiences, your languages and skills, whether you're a student versus a professional. So I want to talk about a couple of examples of Fulbright grants. The first ones that I'll go over are for people who have earned a bachelor's degree. So in other words, postgraduates. One of the most popular programs is the Fulbright U.S. Student Program. And this is for not only graduating college seniors and graduate students, but also young professionals and artists as well. So how it works is applicants go abroad for an entire academic year, and they choose from over 140 countries where the Fulbright U.S. Student Program is eligible. And they're usually, the applicants either study at a university in one of those countries, or for example, if they're an artist, they might do some kind of artist residency. And excuse me. And Fulbright covers the costs of tuition and fees and travel and many of the expenses that are associated with study abroad. One of our MyUSA staff, Franz, who I believe is on this webinar, is an alumni of the Fulbright program. He's studying in Nepal. So if anyone is interested in participating in the Fulbright program, let me know and I'd be happy to put you in touch with some more information, as well as put you in touch with some alumni with disabilities who you can talk to about. The Fulbright English Teaching Assistantship is another example of a Fulbright program, and this is also 1 year in another country. And one reason why this program is so popular is that it allows Fulbrighters to teach in a classroom in another country and teach English to non-native English speakers. So they get to kind of be like a cultural ambassador for US culture in addition to teaching English. So these English teaching assistants, also known as ETAs, they might be teaching in a classroom of kindergartners or high school students, or even university level students. It really depends. Um, and applicants can only apply for one country, but depending on where you go, each country will have different numbers of grants available. So um, although most countries are eligible, you might be more likely to be placed in uh, Germany, for example, or if you apply for Korea, you might be more likely. So Germany offers 140 grants, so this means that they place 140 of these English teaching assistants in Germany to teach. There are 80 grants available for Korea, 75 for Malaysia, 56 for France, 30 for Brazil. Some of the other higher countries that award large numbers are Spain and Turkey. So if you've always dreamed of going to one of those countries, or even another country, and enjoy teaching English and sharing your culture with other students, then I really encourage you to think about applying for the English teaching assistantship. Another program that you might be familiar with is Rotary. This is not funded by the U.S. Department of State. In fact, Rotary is an organization that is non-governmental, and it's all over the world. Some of you might have heard of Rotary before, but Rotary offers several awards for fellowships, professional programs, and scholarships to go abroad, travel abroad. For example, the Rotary World Peace Fellowship offers a 2-year master's level degree program, but it also offers a short professional program for people who already have some work experience. And whether you choose to do the fellowship or the professional program, it's for people who are interested in conflict resolution, peace studies, or international relations. And they travel to either Thailand, Japan, England, USA, Australia, or Argentina, which is where their what they call peace centers are located. And so students will spend 2 years on their master's there, or professionals will spend 3 months to earn a certificate there. Now, the Rotary Ambassadorial Scholarship is for graduate students, although some undergraduates can apply if they've completed at least 2 years of college. I included this, I was very careful to include this because this is actually the scholarship that MIUSA's CEO, Susan Siegel, had applied to and won for her graduate studies in Australia. And it was during that experience where she felt like one of the only people with disabilities on her exchange program that helped her found the organization MIUSA. So it's a really cool story that goes along with that scholarship. And so I really like for more people with disabilities to apply for all of these programs. Now the Ambassadorial Scholarship is going through some changes, so it might have some different requirements in the next year. But currently, multiple countries are available for graduate students to study in. Typically, they will choose the graduate school, choose the country, and then they will create a proposal to Rotary, which will sometimes then award the scholarship for them. In order to learn more, you can contact your Rotary district or visit rotary.org. And I can also give you some more information about those as well. Now I know we might have a few people in this webinar who graduated high school already. Maybe they went to college, maybe they did not. Perhaps they're in the working world by now. Maybe they've just entered the working world or they've been in it for a long time now. But I want you to know that you don't have to be a student in order to have an international exchange experience. There are a lot of programs that bring professionals, including young professionals, mid-career, and senior level professionals to other countries to either develop their job skills or to share their skills with other people. So one example is the Peace Corps program, where people can share uh, their professional skills. But some of the ones I'm going to talk about are the Fulbright Scholar Program and the Fulbright Senior Specialist Program. Both of these are for faculty and professionals and allows them to teach in another countries for a year. The Senior Specialist is more of a short-term academic opportunity between 2 to 6 weeks for U.S. faculty and professionals. Now, for those who have a high school diploma and have had some college, check out the Congress Bundestag Youth Exchange. This is for young professionals between 18 to 24, and they will study in Germany for a year. Now, it's not required that these participants have some German experience already, although it is a plus. It is a preferred. However, they will have a chance to study German, and they will also get to be, the program helps participants arrange an internship in Germany in a related field, so an internship related to your career. So that's also a really great opportunity to make yourself a more desirable candidate for jobs when you return to the United States. Just really quickly, some professional programs have specific locations, like the American Indian Foundation Clinton Fellowship, which brings young American leaders to India to work on topics like education or HIV/AIDS and human rights. It's a 10-month-long program. Atlas Service Corps brings nonprofit leaders to Colombia, and they get to do an internship at a nonprofit sector organization while in Colombia. The program provides stipend, health insurance, and training. It is required that participants have some Spanish proficiency, though. So I hope that so far, by introducing you to some of these programs, you've been able to see a couple of things that sound interesting to you. Hopefully you'll think of, you'll be encouraged to apply for them or consider getting more information about them at least. I want to quickly go over a couple of other examples of scholarships that are open to a wider audience. So if you find your a study abroad program that you're interested in, or maybe a volunteer program, and you've already applied, and you're just looking for some scholarships now to cover your costs, here are a couple of examples of some scholarships you can apply for. The Christensen Grant is a very important one because this is for people who are participating in a work, internship, or volunteer abroad program. And it's really more of a challenge to find scholarships for these types of programs versus study abroad. Usually for students who are planning to study abroad, there tend to be more scholarships available. But I'm really glad that this Christensen Grant exists, so that people, whether students or otherwise, can also get internship experience or work experience, or do community service in another country, because those are also very important parts of being citizen diplomats. Another is the Fund for Education Abroad Scholarship. This is more of the traditional study abroad type of scholarship. And it's really important that you know about this one too, because there's a preference for students who are underrepresented in study abroad. So that would include students with disabilities. And I hope that more students with disabilities will apply for that scholarship. If anyone here loves to write and write about traveling, loves to blog, take pictures and things like that, then I'd really encourage you to check out the Glimpse Correspondence Program, which provides a stipend for people who are reporting about their travels. Now, for that program, I think the requirement is that you have to be abroad for at least 10 weeks. So for people going on shorter term programs, they wouldn't necessarily qualify for Glimpse, although I would still encourage them to blog and take lots of pictures and write lots of stories anyway. um, and then finally, the Foundation for Global Scholars offers scholarships for college or university students that can be used towards study abroad. And if you're wondering where you can find more information about these scholarships, I'm going to include a link. So here in the chat box, I'm going to copy and paste a link to all of these scholarships and funded programs that I talked about today. And these are not the only ones that are listed either. If you go to that website, you're going to find a lot more examples. So if you don't qualify for any of the opportunities that I talked about just now, don't worry. There might be something that is just right for you. Now, a lot of people ask us, again, people with disabilities want to know, well, are there any disability-specific scholarships? And yes, there are. The answer is yes. Now, however, we do encourage them to go beyond searching just disability-related scholarships so that they're not limiting themselves to a small pool of financial aid. But it is true that there are some scholarships for people with specific disabilities. I've listed a few of them on this slide, including one from 1-800-wheelchair.com, which gives two $500 scholarships for high school, college, or university students. And what's interesting about this one is that it actually states on their page that there is no requirement in terms of physical disability or ability, and that applications from anyone are welcome. So in most cases, when you these scholarships are not specifically for study abroad, but if you earn them, you might be able to work with your school or university or the study abroad program to help arrange so that they can go towards your tuition or academic fees if it's an academic related exchange program. Another disability scholarship is awarded by the American Association on Health and Disability. And this doesn't specify a disability type, but there is a preference for students with disabilities who are majoring in either disability studies, public health, or some related field related to disability or health. Plus, there are a whole bunch of disability organizations that award scholarships for U.S. students, including the students and non-students, I should say. Depends on each one. Some organizations that award scholarships include the Alexander Graham Bell, that's for students with hearing loss. There's also the National Federation of the Blind, scholarship for students who are blind. Recording for the Blind and Dyslexic, Spina Bifida Association of America. These all award some kind of scholarship, and all of which are listed on that page that I pasted. Actually, what's funny is that just a few minutes before this webinar, I got a phone call from the Council on Low Vision, and they had called to let me know that they have a new scholarship for people who have low vision, and they wanted me to share it with my USES audiences. So I just wanted to do a last-minute plug for that as well. But we also have that scholarship listed on our financial aid page as well. So be sure to check it out. One of the last things I wanted to cover today is that people with disabilities who receive disability-related funding for accommodations can sometimes use those funds while abroad on their exchange programs. If anyone receives supplemental security income here in the U.S., there is a possibility that you can use those funds towards your international exchange experience, although there are some basic requirements. For example, the study abroad program has to be sponsored by a school in the U.S., and it cannot be available to you in the U.S. So you have to be able to argue that, oh, I have to take this study abroad course in Germany because it's not available at my school in the US, but it's very critical to my educational success, or it relates to my career. So if you can argue that case, then there's a strong possibility that you'll be able to use those supplemental security income funds overseas. You also have to be earning academic credit towards your high school or college degree while abroad. um, some people with disabilities get vocational rehabilitation funds, um, and uh, and in some cases, people who have received these funds have been able to use them during their exchange programs as well. Some examples of people who have been able to do this are someone who studied in Scotland and they used their VR funds towards paying for a personal care attendant, for example. That's a really common issue that people write to us about. You know, I use a personal care assistant. How am I going to be able to bring my assistant with me, or how will I be able to find someone in the country? And also, how will we be able to pay for that? So if you do receive vocational rehabilitation, then definitely talk to your VR counselor. Other examples of ways you can apply VR funds are um, maybe renting a golf cart for transportation if you are attending a really large university campus in the overseas country. Or, VR can also be used towards common things like just tuition or housing, fees, and books. That's what one student did who has a visual impairment when he studied for a year in England. So, what are some other ways that you can learn about scholarships and funded programs and grants and other kinds of funding opportunities? Well, one way is that the National Clearinghouse on Disability Exchange really tries to get the word out whenever we find out about funding opportunities, because we know that people with disabilities are looking for funding in all kinds of ways. So we try and share that information through our e-newsletter. I've included a link on the screen here. mayusa.org/about-mayusa/mailing lists. Another way is just to find us on Facebook. We're at Mobility International on Facebook, and we try and post scholarships and other kinds of opportunities as we hear about them. And that way it's easy to share those too with your friends. And then finally, you can just follow us on Twitter at MobilityINTL, and we'll retweet a lot of scholarships from not only disability organizations, but some of the programs that I talked about, like Fulbright or Gilman or others. Another way is you can just check us out online, mayusa.org/ncde. Here's a screenshot of that page. And there are specifically some tools that I wanted you to be able to find, including Americans Going Abroad. That's one of them that I circled in red. The other is financial aid and funding. That's the same link that I posted earlier. So if you go to that link, you'll be able to find information on funded programs and fellowships, scholarships, including where to find scholarships, as well as some examples of popular scholarships like the ones I talked about. You'll also find some information about using your Social Security income and vocational rehabilitation funds towards study abroad. And then finally, that page also includes some tips on how to do fundraising, as well as some strategies for reducing the costs of your of your international exchange program. So do be sure and visit us online. And then finally, you can always email us if you have questions, whether you have questions about funding or if you just have a question about participating in international exchange with disability in general. We can help with your questions, from everything on, finding a sign language interpreter for your international exchange program, to information on health insurance, and airline tips, air travel tips, and a whole variety of disability-specific accommodations um, while doing your international exchange. So if you're new to MIUSA and to the National Clearinghouse on Disability and Exchange, I hope you'll um, let us know if you're interested in doing international exchange someday. If you already have, um, please share your stories with us, as one of our best resources on our website are stories that people with disabilities have written um, about their travels and international exchange experiences. Um, I'd like to open it up at this time for questions. We have about 10 minutes. Um, Maybe give a smiley face if you learned about a new program that you're thinking about applying for now. Irene is asking, will a copy of this presentation be available to webinar attendees? A lot of helpful information was covered, especially regarding disability scholarships and disability funds abroad. Irene, yes, I did start recording at the beginning, and I'd be happy to share the recording with the webinar attendees, so absolutely. Does anyone else have any questions? Let's see. Does anyone, if for those who do not have questions but who have traveled abroad before, maybe you can type in the chat box one tip for finding funding or fundraising or saving on costs if you've traveled before. For example, um, an example might be choosing a short-term program versus a long-term program, or traveling to a country with lower costs of living, for example. Does anyone want me to go to another slide that I previously covered? All right. Well, if anyone does think of any questions, again, please contact us. I've included our email there, which is clearinghouse@myusa.org. Or again, just find us on our Facebook or Twitter. Um, You're welcome, Sharonda. Well, I hope you have had a chance to learn some new information. I also hope that you will continue to um, think about some destinations or international exchange programs that you might not have considered before. Um, and just know that for pretty much every country or every exchange program type, there's been a person with a disability who has has done something similar, and it's definitely possible. We really hope that more people with disabilities will think of these kinds of programs as not just a faraway um, dream, but something that is actually tangible and accessible and possible. Um, and please feel free to contact us. All right. Well, that concludes our webinar. I'd just like to say thank you again to everyone who joined and who shared their comments and responses. If you have any ideas for future webinar topics, again, feel free to email us. Thank you.